Gary, which Dave forgets too. So, but let's keep this in mind, okay? Here's this math. So Eddie has been a recording artist for 42 years, and he released 12 albums. Paul McCartney has released 12 albums since the year 2000. So there's stuff that was held back that could have been released. Look, fans always want more, and it's part of being a fan. There's no reason for Wolf to be upset by that. Just, be glad people are asking. But, I understand that Wolf doesn't want to spend his days, putting out old Van Halen releases. That's totally understandable. He's got his own career. I don't think he should be doing it. But, people are wondering if Al could be doing it, but that all depends on what they want to do. What do you think, Dave?
Daniel, you're wrong, and you're out of the club.
Oh! Oh, jeez.
No, but I'll tell you what it is. Van Halen never released anything that resembled a bonus track, or very rarely they did. So this is why people are so hungry for stuff, because do we need to hear every nook and cranny and every noodling that Ed did? No, of course not. I mean, some people like that stuff, but most people, it would get old fast.
Right.
But there's definitely stuff in there that would make a great listening experience of unreleased songs or live albums or live DVDs or alternate tracks. I mean, there's definitely enough in there to put out stuff for, I don't know if I want to say a while, but, a few albums of stuff that hardcore fans would like. So, Daniel, are you the only one who couldn't care less about that stuff? No, I know you're not. I go on BH Trading, and some people are like, I don't want to hear that stuff. And no, you're not the only one. But I think there's certainly enough stuff that they could put out a few CDs of unreleased live, whatever, and it won't just be Ed noodling for hours on end with Al behind him on drums.
Yeah, I don't think they should do that. However, when you think about something like Crossing Over, right, which is, I don't know what you want to call that song. Is it unreleased? It was released, but sort of not released. They held that song.
It's a B-side. It's a released B-side.
Well, I guess it's really, but that song was held back, and that song is amazing. And it's like, wait a second. If you're going to throw that away, what the fuck else do you have? I mean, you know what I mean? I would love to hear that song Between Us Two with Sammy. I don't know what it sounds like. I've never heard a lick of it. I would love to hear the 6 songs that they did in 2000 to 2001 with Dave. I don't give a shit. I want to hear those songs. I want to hear that unreleased Gary album. I want to hear a lot of different things like that. There's an unreleased song from the 2004 Best of Both Worlds sessions. I would love to hear that. And one thing that Sammy said that really got my juices flowing when he was on the Eddie Trunk show. We mentioned this in Van Halen News a little while back. My God, he said the tapes from when they first jammed with Sam. How fun would that be to hear? I mean, stuff like that. That's kind of cool. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about just any little thing that Eddie recorded, but I really point to what I said a little earlier, and I'll just repeat it, is that Eddie kept, in interview after interview, he would be like, oh, I got tons of stuff. I've recorded tons of stuff you haven't heard. You see that wall? Look at that wall. That's filled with music that I've made. I mean, when you say stuff like that and you're a big fan of the guy, you're like, well, why can't I hear it? But my whole thing is, what exactly is going to happen to that music? It's just going to get tossed away. Or you know what's going to happen? The tapes are just going to rot and they're going to be unuseful. So,
and it's a shame. It's a shame.
But it's a crime. It's an absolute crime. It's amazing to me. And to be honest with you, I'm a little shocked at Ed because I would have had people transferring it or something. I mean, even years ago, and I understand he was ill in the past few years. That I understand. That takes priority, his health, his family. But I'm talking about years and years ago. He's been in 5150 Studios since 1983. I mean,
but I'm not as shocked as you are, quite frankly, because he didn't look back. He didn't think that.
No, I know. I mean,
look at 5150 Studios, Dave. I mean, it was beat up. It smelled like a cigarette factory. I mean, nobody cleaned the place.
I know.
So am I surprised that the stuff on the wall wasn't cataloged or digitized?
It's incredible.
No, I'm not surprised at that at all, quite frankly.
It's incredible. Letter number 10 comes from Darren James Bristow, and he says, wow, what a podcast. Amazing. I could listen to you and Martin just discuss Van Halen 3 for hours. Great episode, guys, and I also love to hear about what fantasy controversy recordings you'd like to see happen while Dave and Sam are alive and singing decently. I'd immediately have Sam write the lyrics and sing all of Van Halen 3. Well, I have to tell you, Darren, one thing I did disagree with Martin. I don't think that Sam and Dave should go back and redo things like Van Halen 3. I wouldn't have Sam sing that. That's unfair to Gary, and it's insulting. However, Van Halen 3 were re-released. I would suggest that it get remixed and remastered. Maybe throw on That's Why I Love You and a bonus disc of the Van Halen 3 live album that they never put out that's on the shelf. So something like that, I understand. I wouldn't have Sam redo anything, that's for sure. But now, in terms of what Martin Popoff discussed about making albums with what Eddie Van Halen had leftovers, that's tricky business because then you're taking Eddie Van Halen's riffs and giving it to Sammy and Dave to write lyrics to, and then you have Michael Anthony singing background. It's always a hodgepodge when that happens. Alex laying down drums and Mike laying down bass lines. It's, you can't recreate that. It's unfair to Ed, really, to be honest with you. Making a nice deluxe packaging with extra bonus tracks, I think, is fair game, For example, Balance, having a bonus disc with Crossing Over, Humans Being, Between Us Two, and maybe that Balance tour DVD from Canada that they did, the pay-per-view. There you go. There's like a Balance, thing. Like, you could do stuff like that, but I don't think, recreating an album, what Martin said, he had that idea, and well, I think it's interesting, but I think, I don't know, I think you're playing with weird things there if you do something like that. So, what do you think, Dave?
It sounds forced if you try and do it that way. And really, the problem with Van Halen 3 is, the songs just aren't there. So you can swap players or singers or whatever you want and clean up the production and it'll help. But I think at the core was decisions were made, quite frankly, by Ed, and nobody was telling him if they were good ideas or bad ideas.
Right.
That's fundamentally what I think is the issue with the album.
Sure.
So I don't really know how you can retroactively take the DeLorean, without taking the DeLorean and going back in time and redoing the whole thing. Trying to subsequently patch it up, it's not going to come out too good, I don't think.
That's true. Letter number 11 comes from American John Bush from Paris, France. And he says, Dear Dave, I'm writing from Paris, France. First, thanks for the podcast. It has made a tremendous impact on the Van Halen community, especially the tribute to Eddie right after his passing. I hadn't anticipated his death affecting me the way it has, and knowing him only through his music and his media, it was much like a punch to the gut. The Dave and Dave podcast helps soften the blow. If only just a little, it allowed our Van Halen fans to grieve together as part of one extended family. And I first saw Van Halen on the Invasion tour, and the experience changed my life. From the very first notes of Light Up the Sky, the spirit of the mighty was imprinted on my soul forever. It still moves me to today. Not a day goes by when I don't think about it, listen to them, or reminds me of the good times surrounding Van Halen. I know Dave and Dave followers feel the same way, and it's what unites us as a tribe, transcending race, religion, or bullshit politics. No matter what's going on, or when you hear the opening notes for any Van Halen song, say, ain't talking about love. Life just gets a little bit better, especially when it's quitting time on a Friday afternoon. Because of the Dave and Dave podcast, I have become more of a well-rounded Van Halen fan. I am still a hardcore Dave partisan, but because of the podcast, I re-listened to the Sammy and Gary stuff all the way through for the first time in some cases and realized I was missing out on some good music, so thank you. A suggestion for the cast. How about a segment on both of the Daves? Some general background. How did you get where you are in life? Maybe that's a little too stalkerish in today's world, but I'm sure that Dave and Dave listeners would be interested. Keep up. Good work, gentlemen. You certainly made 2020 a lot more bearable, and I look forward to listening in 2021. Keep the faith. American John Bush in Paris, France. Well, John, I thank you. And I'm glad you caught on to the podcast, and we appreciate your support, and I'm so glad that you opened your mind and re-examined some of the Sammy and Gary era stuff. I really don't think the eras need to be compared. If you view it as Eddie's whole body of work, it gives the catalog a different perspective. If you kind of forget who's singing and just focus on what Ed's doing, I think it really represents who he is as an artist, as a player and a writer. As for Dave and I, we like to focus on Van Halen, not on us. I don't think the listeners, want to hear much about Dave and I. We're both 50 years old, soon to be 51. Dave's thin, I'm heavy, I'm bald, Dave's getting there. Dave's an accountant and I'm a reporter, and that's about all you really need to know.
There you go. That's it in a nutshell.
Letter number 12, and Dave's going to love this one, comes from Robert Gonzalez from Costa Mesa, California. And this is going to go right up Dave's craw. So here we go. So he says, I love your podcast. You guys are super fun to listen to. No dry pretense or unfunny yakety yak. I love Van Halen with David Lee Roth. But from 1986 onwards, Van Halen music is boring. It always has been and still is, but it's not entirely Hagar's fault. Needless to say, prior to A Different Kind of Truth, I pretty much cared less about what Van Halen was up to. But like trillions of fans, Eddie's passing had me revisiting his official catalog, and I suspected all of the Van Hagar records are not my cup of tea. But what if I listened to this much hated Van Halen 3 record? With no prejudgment, Van Halen 3 is not bad. It's just silly long. Eddie needs an editor. What if I could be that editor? As a musician and songwriter, I can feel what Eddie Van Halen was going for on this record. Eddie was always envisioned his band to be a progressive-oriented band. Roth and Hagar clouded that vision. In Gary Cherone, Eddie saw someone who could belt out like Roger Daltrey and write Townsend-influenced lyrics. And the newly sober Eddie is going to take his shot at making Who influenced Pink Floyd / Peter Gabriel progressive rock, expressing where he's at 42 years old. What if we change the album cover and title? Now, if we called the album Wake Up or Woke, what if we edit some of the songs and remove some of them altogether? And this is what he put together. He starts the album with Once. He says, this is a unique and beautiful song, but it's overlong. After the second guitar solo, start a slow fade at the 5:33 mark and end the song at 5:53. This is a great lost single. Song number 2, Dirty Water Dog. Song number 3, New World. Song number 4, How Many Say I. It's an interlude song. After the second chorus, end the song at exactly 3:19. Now, song number 5, Without You. Song number 6, Josephina. He says it's a bit like Queen meets Jellyfish meets Red Cross and meets the Beach Boys, Baroque pop. I can see why they stopped the presses for it. Song number 7, From Afar. Song number 8, One I Want. And song number 9, Fire in the Hole. Yep, it's boneheaded formula Van Hagar riff age, but it's a familiar taste to wrap up this collection. I really love this Wake Up record in this revised order, and the songs hang together in deeper ways. It really plays into the kick-ass but weird sensibilities of Fair Warning. But with a little editing, I think we can make a 1998 Van Halen record better. Robert Gonzalez from Costa Mesa, California. Well, looks like we're headed into another episode of What If? Now it's time for What If with Dave and Dave. Shit, what if? What if? Dave Marconi's favorite segment, What If? What if, motherfucker?
I don't do what ifs.
Wow, that is bold, for sure. Robert Gonzalez, I appreciate your efforts here. I agree with the album needs a new title, for sure. I think Van Halen 3 was a lazy title. Wake Up is a good one. I actually like that title. However, it's more of a, when I hear Wake Up, it reminds me more of a nod to the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge song, The Dream Is Over, when they're like, psst, hey man, wake up. That reminds me of that. I think putting Once, New World, and How Many Say I at the top of the album is a mistake, though. You're going to lose people immediately. While I agree with you, removing Primary, I understand that, but losing Year to the Day and Ballad of the Bullet, I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense. Number 1, I would suggest the album needs to be remixed and properly remastered. Number 2, I think it needs more Michael Anthony on bass and backing vocals. Number 3, I think it could have used That's Why I Love You and have that song retooled. I'd lose New World in primary, and I'd give it a proper Eddie Van Halen instrumental track. I think the current order, as it is fine. I think How Many Say I is even more poignant now with Ed gone, but I agree it could use some editing for sure. I don't know how much better all this would have given the album a better reception, but Gary didn't seem like the proper fit for the band. I wouldn't really have called the band Van Halen, to be honest with you. I think it might have had a certain kind of brand to it that people were expecting a certain sort of sound or crunch, but who knows?